Good morning, everybody. Thank Crunchy, it's Friday. I'm so glad it's Friday. It has been the longest week ever. How's it felt for you lot? Has it been like Wednesday for like the last 5 days and you're just like, when am I going to get off? How are we all? Good week? Any wins? Anything you want to tell me about? No? Okay. Lovely, let's jump into the news. I've got quite a few stories to go through today. Clearly, after it's been a quiet news week, all the journalists have woken up. So I'm going to start with a story this morning that I actually saw on the news while I was sort of getting my day together. I always sit and watch the BBC News and just see what they've got to say. So this is BBC News. And this is botched installation schemes was doomed to fail, say MPs. Now, this is about the Eco4 grant scheme that was launched back in 2022, I think, where you could get grants for installation for your home, like cavity wall insulation and things like that. And this particular news report on the TV was interviewing people who had work done as part of the scheme, and actually it was more detrimental. So older properties, I've always said this, older properties do not work well with modern energy efficiency methods. And there was one lady that was being interviewed, and she was an elderly lady, lived on her own, and she'd had some work done on her property, and from that point onwards the property had become damp and mouldy and everything else. And the government and the local council did a report on her home and basically said it was unfit for human habitation. She shouldn't live there, but they never actually released that report to her. So she was still living in this damp property, detrimental to her health completely. And now the government are calling for, or somebody is calling for it to be investigated under fraud. Just a comment there. I worked around Eco4. It was not good for the local government side at all. I think the problem is they inject these schemes, but they don't think them all the way through. They don't actually figure out where it's going to work, where it's not going to work. Like everything with government, there's no joined up thinking. So I'll just read you the article that was in the BBC News website this morning. Thousands of people are living in homes that pose a risk to their health and safety after a catastrophic failure of two government insulation schemes. Major defects have been found in over 30,000 homes fitted with insulation through government schemes since 2022. The Public Accounts Committee has now said that the level of non-compliance by installers should be investigated for fraud and that the government's current response was not credible. It goes on to say, a spokesman added that for the vast majority, this means a home may not be energy efficient at all. The Parliamentary Committee, why am I struggling today? Parliamentary Committee, which monitors the effectiveness of government spending, said the insulation scheme, Eco4, and GBIS, which began in 2022, was so badly designed that they were almost bound to fail. Wow. It said they had received virtually no attention from senior government officials, so that they did not know whether the schemes were working or not in the last 2 years. Committee Chair Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown said the level of non-compliance by insulation installers was so extreme that the matter should be referred to the Serious Fraud Office. I mean, that's dramatic. That is really dramatic. The report also criticised Trustmark, the organisation in charge of overseeing the quality of installation work. I don't know, for not notifying officials of high levels of faulty external wall insulation from October 2024. Responding to the committee report, Trustmark said it remained totally committed to ensuring strong consumer protection for all types of home improvement. They might be committed, but they're not doing it, are they? We are continuing to work with the government. Our scheme providers, registered businesses were appropriate, guarantees provided to get problems found and fixed. These examples of poor quality workmanship are completely unacceptable and underline the need for change and reform. I mean, realistic. There's a lot of comments. I'm just going to go back and read some of the comments relevant to this. I think it's a big story, and I think it's only going to get bigger. In my opinion, the previous government knew it was a mess, and there were many consultations that were not needed. Yeah, that's usually the way. That's usually the way. I did a bathroom refurb. Tenant didn't open the window or turn the lights on or the fan. Is the mould my fault? No, the mould isn't your fault. The mould is the tenant's fault because they're not ventilating the property. Educate the tenant. That's what I'd say. Educate the tenant. The way the schemes were very time limited, councils had to get them spent within. Yeah, I think that's the problem. They put these time constraints on. You've got to spend the budget by this point. Oh, goodness me. You've got to spend the budget by this point, and of course then everyone scrambles and they don't tick all the boxes. So interesting story, and I think that one is going to rumble on. I don't think that's a one-hit wonder, if to be honest with you. So let's move on to a story in Letting Agent Today. So this headline is Radical Agency Says It Wants Values-Led Landlord Clients. What does that mean? Let's explore what that means. An innovative letting agency says it's looking for values-led landlords as clients. Good Place Lettings, which featured on BBC's The One Show earlier this week, has been set up in London as a joint initiative between homelessness charity Crisis and an existing agency called Homes for Good. Good Place Lettings describes itself as an agency with a difference, focusing on the needs of both the landlord and tenant. The agency provides a bespoke tenancy support service that helps tenants set up bills and access support where necessary. Why should that be bespoke? I'm not being funny, but isn't that something all letting agents should be capable of doing in the first week of tenancy? When I was in agency, I certainly had tenants that were moving out from mum and dad's and were moving in for the first time. And certainly when I worked for a homeless charity called Dens in Hemel Hempstead, that was one of the biggest barriers that we had, people just not knowing how to behave as tenants. And I don't mean, antisocial behaviour. I mean genuinely not knowing how to use a washing machine, not knowing how to use a microwave, unclear how fridges and freezers work with the temperatures, all of those sort of things. We don't think about those things when we're just handing over a tenancy agreement and the keys or knock yourself out. People didn't know how to set up bills, so we would do all that for them and then write to them and say, your gas account is with British Gas, your electricity account is with so-and-so, here is the account number, here is their contact number if you want to change it. All of that. To me as an agent, that was part of my job, but it seems to be these days nobody wants to actually do their job. They just want to sit at their shiny desk, not leave it for the fear of actually meeting other human beings, and then just expect the tenant to know exactly how to be a tenant, but nobody walks into a letting agent knowing how to be a letting agent. Anyway, I've gone off on a tangent. Oh, I've got some comments in there as well. You're right, there was so much wrong with the Eco4, there was so much wrong with it. There are so many people who do not know the basics. Some owner-occupiers are the same. Oh, absolutely. I'm not saying it's purely a tenant disease by any stretch of the imagination. Not knowing how to do stuff. That's why there's so many YouTube videos out there. Pretty much YouTube video for everything. And that was one of the things that I put together. I've made a welcome pack that landlords and agents can use to send out to their tenants. You kind of adapt it to your purpose, but it's got everything in there, like little fact sheets at the back, how to bleed a radiator, how to top the boiler up, links to YouTube videos to do that, and all those sort of things. And I think, we expect our tenants to know how to be tenants, but we don't do anything to teach them how to be tenants. One of the things that I always used to do was make sure that we left all the operating manuals for all of the white goods in the property, and then say to the tenant, have you read the manual? When they come to you, have you read the manual? No, I haven't read the manual. Okay, go back and read the manual. If it's still a problem, come back to me. And 9 times out of 10, they never came back to me. They've read the manual. So, you know, that's one of those things. So the article goes on to say, Good Place Lettings describes itself as an agency with a difference, focusing on the needs of both the landlords and the tenant with the agent. Oh, I've read that bit already. See, I got distracted. I got on my soapbox again. Based in Brick Lane in London. Oh, nice area. Oh, salt beef bagels are good there. Good Place Lettings say it's been established to help tackle housing inequality head on by helping private rented sector landlords offer good quality homes for rent alongside responsible property management. The business manages homes for landlords that are let to both market rent and affordable rent levels, including to people in receipt of benefits. It says it's working with a network of socially minded landlords who share the vision that the rental market works for everybody. Why can't the government think like that? You know? Why not? I just think that's a really good idea. And I think with the Renters' Rights Act coming in, there's going to be maybe more landlords that will look at this kind of ethical letting, you know, working with these community interest company agencies. And as long as they are set up correctly, like this one working alongside Crisis, so we know they're not going to go out of business tomorrow. You know, they're working alongside Crisis. There was another one, I think St Mungo's, many years ago, was the very first to set up its own letting agency. And there, I think theirs was, I can't remember what theirs was called, but St Mungo's was the first. And I think it's something that's needed because Crisis, St Mungo's, all of those charities know the mindset of people in crisis who are maybe self-medicating, homeless, etc., etc. And they can help educate the letting agent while the letting agent educates the tenants on how to be good tenants. I think it's a really good initiative. I advised the tenant on the mould and to vent. She didn't listen, but it was really worried re-council aggro. Well, the councils aren't daft. They know when tenants are playing the system. So, yeah, it is what it is. Councils know that tenants purposely don't ventilate this, that and the other. It's definitely what some landlords are looking for. I agree. I think it is good news. But I think it's sad that it has to be a bespoke service. I think it's really sad that letting agents don't do this as a general. Even if the council does attend, if the property isn't faulty, they won't do anything. I agree with you, absolutely. If there's no issues, the councils won't get involved. They've got other things to do. They've got landlords to fine for not having HMO licences. They're not going to worry about your little bit of mould if the tenant don't open a window. Don't worry about it. So I'm going to move on to my next story, which won't refresh for some reason. This is in LandlordZone. And this is landlords using AI cause tribunal hearing headaches. Dun, dun, dun. That's my dramatic headline of the day. So this is an article talking about AI and the reliance on it when going to both court and tribunals. Now, I follow a barrister who I have known my whole 30 years in housing. He was the youngest housing barrister in the UK, and he's a guy called Matt Lamb. And I follow him on LinkedIn, and I also follow him on Substack. And he writes about these AI hallucinations in housing law cases and other law cases. And it's fascinating and frightening all at the same time. So this article goes on to say, legal experts have warned landlords to be wary of using AI. And I don't know how often I bang on about this. AI doesn't know everything, I promise you. I was literally on Facebook this morning arguing with some woman about deposit protection. So it was a let only. The tenants paid the deposit to the agent for reasons known only to the gods. The agent protects the deposit as part of the let only service. Why do agents do that? It fucking annoys me. Then what happened is it was insured, and then the insured scheme obviously unprotects after a year, and it's the landlord's responsibility to reprotect. Well, she didn't, claiming that it was the agent should have notified her. No, the agent shouldn't have notified you. You paid for a let and forget. The agent let and they forgot. That's the whole point of let only, is a let and forget. And then she pulled something up on Google and gave me a screenshot of AI said this. AI said the answer that you wanted because you worded the question in such a way. Can't bullshit a bullshitter, love. Anyway, back to the article. Landlord Law's solicitor, Tessa Shepperson. I've worked with Tessa many, many times. She knows her stuff. If you do anything, make sure you follow her, Tessa Shepperson. Look at her Landlord Law website. It's really good. It is a membership site, but it is really good. And she, like me, doesn't cut any mustard when she's talking. She's very abrupt, but in a nice, probably in a nicer way than me, to be honest with you. So Tessa goes on to say, many cases are being reported that claimants and their lawyers are misled by false information provided by AI tools. Tenants look up advice on ChatGPT and are then annoyed when lawyers, landlords and letting agents try to explain the information is wrong. Oh, I get that all the time. The practice is being more common with landlords too, says Tessa. Sometimes this false information is used in court proceedings where it is inevitably found out. There have been many, many cases when its advice has been proven to be wrong and the outcome of those relying on not good. So basically, judges aren't daft. They're just going to go away and check the facts. And if your facts are wrong, they're going to throw your case out. It's just ridiculous. Tessa goes on to say to LandlordZone, people don't like paying for advice. They absolutely don't. I have an advice service and people want my advice. They know that I know my shit, but do they want to pay for it? Oh, why do I have to pay for it? Because it's valuable. If I was giving you nonsense like AI, I could understand why you wouldn't want to pay for it. But you've got 30 years of genius in here. Pay for it. People don't like paying for the advice. They'll try ChatGPT instead, but AI is notorious for making things up. Oh, hell yeah. It relies on what other people have written. That's correct. And these people aren't always lawyers, and it's certainly not accurate. I've had AI tell me that it's all right to have a rent increase review clause in your tenancy agreement after the 1st of May. Oh, Giles Peaker, another god in the housing law world. He's a solicitor at Anthony Gold. I think he's actually a partner at Anthony Gold. Says that as issues with the use of AI in submissions continues to rise, it's not surprising that the property tribunals have had to share of problems, which is perhaps more surprising as it seems to be largely on part of the landlord respondents rather than leaseholders or tenants. He goes on to say that basically there is a huge cost to the tribunal and the Supreme Courts when these cases have to go further or get thrown out. It's a waste of court time. Peaker reports that the severity of the tribunal's response to false AI-generated submissions appears to be increasing. At a tribunal, when using AI, you may get short shrift from the judge if you're basing your case solely on the information generated by AI. Ignorance is not an excuse. I agree with that. The amount of people I have to argue with that have said, ChatGPT said this, so they're right. So an inanimate object is telling you that something is right, but a human that's actually lived it, you're not listening to. Madness. Right, let's move on. It's soapbox day today, isn't it? I'm getting right into it. So my next article is in the Negotiator. And this is Rent Rise Appeals Will Overwhelm Tribunals Under the Renters' Rights Act, warns top judge. I think I have to open this one with no shit Sherlock. It's not going to take a genius to work that one out. So I did some research, and in 2024, 900 tenants appealed their rent increases in 2024. On average, it took 8 months for the tribunal to make a decision on those 900 cases. You can only imagine under the Renters' Rights Act, more tenants are going to challenge their rent just because they can. That's going to be chaos. That's going to be chaos. So this article goes on to say, critics say free challenges and rent delays uplift. So basically that means you get no backdate. So at the moment, if a tenant challenges a rent increase at tribunal and the tribunal make a decision, it's then backdated to when the Section 13 would have naturally taken effect. So basically the tenant walks away from tribunal with some rent arrears. Under the new regime, there's no back date. So basically the date that the decision is made by the tribunal is the date the new rent starts. So it's kind of a no-brainer for tenants to just kick the rent increase down the road. Even if the rent increase is going to stick, at least they're going to have it 8, 9, 10, 12 months later rather than immediately after the Section 13 notice. So the article goes on to say that the Renters' Rights Act, designed to protect private rented tenants from excess rent rises, could overwhelm England's housing tribunal system, with tenants routinely challenging increases. Senior judges, lawyers and landlord groups have warned. The Act, due to come into force on the 1st of May, will overhaul the Section 13 process and mechanise how rent is risen. That doesn't sound right. Under the new regime, tenants will be able to challenge any proposed rent increase at the first tier tribunal at no cost. So that's the same as it is now, so that little bit hasn't changed. Critically, the tribunal will not be able to set higher rents than what the landlord has proposed, whereas currently they can, even if it concludes the market rent is higher. Critics argue that this therefore removes the downside of appealing, encouraging tenants to challenge the rise only if it delays paying more. Is there a question? We have to hope tribunal doesn't use AI to make their decisions. Great comment. I like that. Yeah, absolutely. Can you imagine? Actually, yeah, I don't know. I watched a film last night. I'm going off on a tangent. I watched a film last night called Idiocracy. It was on Amazon Prime, I think. And it's got Owen Wilson and a few other comic actors in it. And basically, it was about two people from like now have been put into a cryogenic pod. And they're supposed to only be frozen for a year, but people forget about them, and they wake up 500 years later in 2555. And basically, society has got dumber and dumber and dumber and dumber to the point where they don't even know how to grow crops anymore. They've almost sort of gone back to being cavemen. It is the funniest film, but quite scary. I can see it happening. Idiocracy. If you've got nothing to do this evening, watch Idiocracy. It's a film that I think you take it with a pinch of salt, but also it's almost like a future documentary. Scary, absolutely scary. But anyway, I digress. In a speech to the Housing Law Practitioners Association, Geoffrey Voss, master of the rolls, he's the important one, he makes things acts from when they're bills, said the reforms could create an incentive for tenants to apply to tribunal in respect of every rent increase to delay its implementation. In addition, any increases that is upheld will only take effect from the tribunal's decision, potentially postponing higher payments for months. Ben Beadle, chief executive of the NRLA, goes on to say, with just 34 judges sitting on the tribunal, it is unlikely to cope with such an influx of cases once the Act comes into force. He adds, it is one of the many aspects of the Act where warm words are not being matched by any evidence of the detailed work needed to ensure it works in practice. Ministers have powers to allow rent increases to be backdated if the tribunal is judged to be overwhelmed, while the government says its work is underway to increase capacity. So this backdate, so before Angela Rayner stepped down or was sacked, whatever it was, she put in a Henry VIII amendment, which basically meant if the tribunals are overwhelmed by all of these rent increase appeals, she would be able to reinstate the back date. So basically give tenants what's the word? Not an incentive, the opposite of an incentive. Unincentivise, let's go with that. The tenants to make the appeals. That will be whoever is Secretary of State at the time will be able to reinstate that. So that's a good thing. And then I'm going to move on to disincentive. Yeah, I don't know what the word is. It's Friday, who cares? I'm moving on to Landlord Today. So this is my last news story, but then I'm going to go on, because it's Friday, we're going to do those funny stories again. So this is my last news story, and then we're going to do the funny story. This is in Landlord Today. Dramatic rise in buy-to-let possessions, new figures released. There has been a dramatic 28.6% rise in the number of buy-to-let properties being repossessed by lenders. Some 900 buy-to-let properties were taken back on behalf of lenders in the third quarter of 2025. The latest figures are available. The data comes from UK Finance, the trade body for mortgage lenders. Consequences, Richard, thank you. Not disincentivising whatever I said. Consequences, thank you. It's a good job you're here. Honestly. English language, not me first. Anyway, thank you, Richard. Ironically, the shock figures come in an otherwise surprisingly optimistic market snapshot. In quarter 3 2025, there were just over 59,000 new buy-to-let loans advanced in the UK, worth 10.9 billion. This was up quite significantly compared to the same quarter of the previous year, which was 22.7. The average gross buy-to-let rental yield in the UK for the quarter 3 of 25 was 7.5%. The average interest rate across the buy-to-let mortgage in the UK was 4.85%. Reflecting on the downward movements of the interest rate, the average buy-to-let interest cover ratio, the ICR, for the UK was 215%. Heaven to Betsy. What's happening out there? Why are landlords being repossessed by their lender? Interestingly, it says buy-to-let properties. So what we can do here is rule out anybody who is renting their property out without the correct product. I see that quite a lot. I see landlords renting out their property, their residential property that they've lived in, they've moved out and they're going to rent it out. They don't realise that a residential mortgage is not the correct product. Yes, you can get written permission from your lender. That would then be perfectly fine. But you need a buy-to-let mortgage otherwise. I see a lot of people doing that. So it's not that. So what is the cause of the repossessions? I might actually see if I can find that data and drill down to see if there's any more information, because it would be quite interesting to see, is it a case of landlords just not paying so that it can be repossessed and it kind of takes the stress away from them? They don't have to evict the tenant, do they? Because the lender's repossessed. I don't know. Interesting. I've got a few comments on that, so just let me go back. Do you think backdating rent will come back when the courts are overwhelmed? I don't know, Richard. I hope so. I hope someone sees sense. We've got Steve Reed in as housing minister at the moment. He does, I would like to say, he does seem to have common sense, but then a few things that he's said of recent days, I'm not so sure anymore. I would like to think that they would bring that in should the tribunals be overwhelmed, because like you say, it's a consequence for the tenants. At the moment, there's no consequence. I can actually see it happening, to be fair, and there'll be buy-in from landlords. Yeah, quite possibly. Quite possibly. Oh, I missed another comment there. Yeah, there are shitloads of landlords taking the rent and not paying mortgages. Why though? Why? I wonder why they're not paying their mortgages. You think Pennycook, you think Matthew Pennycook is very good? Are you on crack? Seriously. Matthew Pennycook is the most ignorant, self-absorbed, egotistical twat I have ever had the misfortune to meet. That's probably defamation. That's a personal preference. Please don't sue me, Matthew Pennycook. Not my cup of tea, I'm afraid. Really not. Very, very blinkered, self-serving peacock. Steve Reed, not met him, so I can't really comment, but from what I've seen on the TV, not very bright. Goodness me. Can you all still see me? Yes? I had a funny thing come up on my screen then, not sure. Anyway, so let's go on to the very last bit today. Thank you. I just had this bizarre thing come up on my screen. So this is our funny story in RightMove. So RightMove have got these funny stories, and I've picked this particular one today. So this one I thought was quite cute to end on. So my wife and I went to view a house occupied by a nice but entirely bonkers old lady. As she was showing us around, I could hear a commotion in the kitchen. "Oh, don't worry," she says, "that's Albert." We thought no more about it, assuming Albert was the husband. That is until we arrived in the kitchen and discovered that Albert was in fact a feral badger that breaks in through the cat flap and gnaws at the kitchen units. Strange enough, but not to get stranger. In order to get Albert to leave the house, she removes a fish from the fridge and begins gently slapping the beast in the face until it scurries out of the kitchen. For a moment, I genuinely thought that she was going to be mauled to death by Albert, which would be tricky to explain to the estate agent. But it turns out Albert is terrified of fish, obviously. Needless to say, we didn't buy the house. I thought that was a great story. I mean, badgers are vicious. Vicious. But yeah, I thought that was quite funny. Badgers are scared of fish, apparently. Who knew? So now to get the vampires out, we've got garlic, a cross on the wall for the devil, and now we've got to keep a fish in the fridge for the badgers. Okay, thank you all for joining me. I think my little rant about Matthew Pennycook has allowed me to have some restrictions. I've got a big triangle warning sign in the corner of my live telling me I have restrictions. I may be banned. So I'm going to call it a day for now. If you have any questions, do please write them in the comments. I will obviously come back to you with any replies. Thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you 9 o'clock Monday morning, and we will do it all again. But this time I will keep my potty mouth to myself. Have a good weekend, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.